If you can't save money, it's probably not your fault, but that's exactly why you're stuck. Because think about it. How many times have you tried to save just to end up right back where you started? You cut your spending. You tell yourself, this time is different. You try to do everything right. And for a moment, it actually feels like it's working. Until something happens. A bill, an emergency, a price you didn't expect. And just like that, everything you saved is gone. Again. And after a while, it stops feeling like bad luck. It starts feeling like a pattern. Like no matter what you do, you can't actually get ahead. And that's the part nobody really talks about. Because from the outside, it looks like a simple problem. Just save more. Just spend less. Just be more disciplined. But if it were that simple, it would have worked by now. So the real question isn't, why can't you save money? It's, why does it feel like you were never given a real chance to begin with? Because the truth is, most people aren't bad with money. They're trying. They go to work. They pay their bills. They try not to spend on stupid things. They're not out here being reckless. And yet, at the end of the month, there's still nothing left. Or worse. They're already behind, and that's what makes it confusing. Because on paper, you're doing everything right. You're working. You're being responsible. You're trying to stay in control. But somehow, it still feels like you're stuck in the same place. So you tell yourself, next month will be different. I'll save more. I'll be more careful. I'll finally get ahead. And for a moment, you actually believe it. You start paying attention. You cut back. You say no to things you want. And for a second, it feels like you're finally getting control. But then, something always shows up. A bill you forgot. A price that went up. An expense you couldn't avoid. And just like that, the progress disappears. And the worst part is, it doesn't feel like a mistake. It doesn't feel like you did something wrong. It feels like it was always going to happen. So you keep going, day by day, week by week, trying to stay on top of everything, trying not to fall behind. But deep down, there's this quiet feeling that no matter how hard you try, it's just not enough. And after a while, you stop asking, how do I get ahead? And start asking, how do I not fall further behind? And the hardest part about all of this is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It builds quietly, slowly, over time. At first, it's small things, a late fee, a bill that's a little higher than expected, something you didn't plan for, but had no choice but to pay. And on their own, they don't feel like a big deal. But then it happens again, and again, and again, until one day, you realize something. You're not just dealing with one problem anymore. You're dealing with layers of them. Because nothing really goes away. That late fee? It takes from next month. That unexpected expense? Now you're behind on something else. That quick solution? It creates a bigger problem later. And suddenly, you're not managing your life anymore. You're managing damage, trying to keep everything from falling apart at once. And that's exhausting. Because no matter how hard you try, there's always something waiting. A bill, a deadline, a number you don't want to look at. And even on the days when things feel okay, that pressure is still there, in the back of your mind. You go out, but you're calculating. You buy something small, but you're second-guessing. You try to relax, but you're thinking about what's coming next. Because when money feels tight, there's no off switch. It follows you everywhere, and over time, that pressure starts to change you. You become more careful, more cautious, more aware of every decision. Not because you want to, but because you have to. And slowly, without even realizing it, you stop thinking about what's best and start thinking about what's safe, what won't make things worse, what won't push you further behind. And that's where it really starts to hurt. Because now, you're not moving forward anymore. You're just trying not to collapse, holding everything together, with less and less room to breathe. And no matter how much effort you put in, it still feels like you're one step away from everything slipping, and at some point, you have to ask yourself, is this really just bad luck? Or is something else going on? But what if this isn't just bad luck? What if it's not just a series of random problems, or poor timing, or even bad decisions? What if there's actually a reason this keeps happening? Because when you step back and really look at it, there's a pattern. Every time you try to get ahead, something pulls you back. Every time you fix one problem, another one shows up. Every time you think, this month will be different, it somehow ends the same way. And after a while, it stops feeling random. It starts feeling predictable. Like no matter what you do, you end up in the same place. And that's when the question changes. It's no longer, why did this happen? It becomes, why does this keep happening? Because maybe the problem isn't just what you're doing. Maybe it's the position you're starting from. Think about it. When you don't have a financial cushion, everything becomes fragile. One small problem doesn't stay small. It spreads. It affects everything else. And that changes how you make decisions. Because now, you're not thinking about optimization. You're thinking about survival. You're thinking, what fixes this right now? Not, what's best long-term? And that difference is bigger than it seems. Because the person with money gets to play a different game. They can wait. They can compare. They can avoid bad decisions. But when you don't have that luxury, you don't get those options. You don't get to choose the best path. You get whatever path is available. And over time, that creates a gap between people who can think strategically and people who are forced to react. And the scary part is, reactive decisions almost always cost more. Not because you want them to, but because you don't have the space to avoid them. So slowly, without even realizing it, you're not just dealing with problems anymore. You're being shaped by them. Your decisions change. Your priorities change. Your mindset changes. Not because you're bad with money, but because your situation trained you that way. And the longer you stay in that cycle, the more normal it starts to feel. Until one day, you stop questioning it. You just assume, this is how it is. But it's not. And once you see that pattern, you start to realize something important. This isn't random. There's a reason it keeps happening. Here's what's actually happening. When you don't have enough money, you don't just lose the ability to save. You lose access to better choices. Because having money isn't just about what you can buy. It's about what you can avoid. Late fees, high interest, emergency costs. All the things that quietly make life more expensive only show up when you don't have a buffer. When you don't have savings, a small problem doesn't stay small. It becomes urgent. And urgency is expensive because now you don't have time to think. You don't have time to compare. You don't have time to wait for something better. So you take what's available, even if it costs more, even if it's not ideal. And that might not seem like a big deal, but it happens again and again and again, until over time, you start paying more for the same things, or sometimes even worse things. And that's the trap. People with less money often end up spending more overall, not because they want to, but because they don't have access to the choices that would save them money. And it doesn't stop there, because once you fall behind, the system starts working against you. Interest builds, fees stack, options disappear, and slowly, your situation becomes more fragile, more sensitive, more dependent on everything going right. But life never goes perfectly. So even small disruptions start to feel overwhelming. A broken phone, a car repair, a medical bill, things that should be manageable suddenly feel heavy because there's no margin for error, no safety net, no buffer, no room to breathe. And that's where the real pressure comes from. Not just the lack of money, but the lack of space. Space to think, space to plan, space to choose better. Because good financial decisions almost always require one thing: time. And when you're constantly under pressure, time is the one thing you don't have. So instead of making decisions that move you forward, you make decisions that keep you afloat. And over time, that difference becomes everything. Because while others are optimizing, you're stabilizing. While others are building, you're maintaining. And that gap keeps getting wider. And after a while, that doesn't just affect your money. It starts to affect the way you see everything. And after a while, you stop thinking about getting ahead. Not because you don't want to, but because it stops feeling realistic. You stop asking, how do I move forward? And start asking, how do I not fall apart? How do I make it through this week? How do I keep everything together? How do I avoid one more setback? And that becomes your goal. Not growth, not progress, just survival. And the longer you stay in that state, the more it starts to change you. Opportunities don't feel exciting anymore. They feel risky. Decisions don't feel empowering. They feel heavy. Even small improvements start to feel uncertain. Because when you've spent so much time trying not to lose, it's hard to switch back to trying to win. And that shift happens quietly, without you noticing, until one day you realize something. You've been playing defense this whole time, protecting what little you have, instead of building something more. And that's a hard realization, because it doesn't come with a clear answer. It doesn't tell you exactly what to fix. It just shows you why everything feels harder than it should, why progress feels slow, why even your best effort doesn't seem to lead anywhere. And maybe that's where most people get stuck. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, but because they've been living in a situation that constantly forces them to choose survival over growth, urgency over planning, short-term fixes over long-term progress. And when you live like that long enough, it becomes normal, your default, your way of thinking. So when things don't improve, you don't question the situation. You question yourself. You start thinking, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm not disciplined enough. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'm just not doing enough. And that belief is what keeps you stuck. Because if you think the problem is you, you'll keep trying harder in the same conditions. You'll push more, sacrifice more, stress more, without ever stepping back to ask, is this even designed to work for me? Because if everything around you is built to take first and leave you with what's left, then of course it feels like you're always behind. Of course it feels like you're always catching up. Not because you're failing, but because you're starting from a place where progress is harder by default. And maybe the real shift doesn't start with working harder, or saving more, or cutting more. Maybe it starts with something simpler, seeing what's actually happening, understanding the pressure, understanding the limitations, understanding why it feels this way. Because once you see that clearly, something changes. Not your situation, not immediately, but your perspective. And sometimes, that's the first step to finally doing something different. Not out of pressure, not out of panic, but out of awareness. And that awareness might be the only thing that slowly starts to move you forward.